In this exercise, we're going to be discussing creating rectangular patterns. Rectangular patterns are part of a feature reuse series where you have rectangular patterns, circular patterns, and mirroring. It's been attributed to Picasso that good artists borrow and great artists steal, and it's the same for your work inside of the inventor. If you take the time to draw something out, why take the time to draw it out all over again when you can just pattern it? So let's get started. Pattern command. You have the rectangular pattern appear at the top. Once again, top to bottom, left to right. You can either pattern the individual feature or you can pattern a solid. Most of the time, we're going to be patterning an individual feature. So we'll come down here and we'll select rectangle here. Then it asks for a direction. One tip to you is grab something that's easy to get a hold of. To me, this line here is much easier to grab than some of these rounded edges and things. So I'll grab this line up here. You'll notice right away that it went in the wrong direction. The little arrow's going in the wrong direction. So I can just flip it and it'll say, hey, go this way. And I'll put in, say, 15 millimeters. And then I can decide how many of these little rectangles I want. Say 5, 6 rectangles here. And then I can go on to the next direction. Say 4. And I'll drop this down to 8 millimeters. So now I have all my buttonholes that I want to put in here. I'll say OK. You can see how easy it was to create that pattern. The next thing I'm going to look at is the hole for this sketch here. I'm going to turn this on so I can see it. I'm going to zoom in here. And I'm going to use the rectangular pattern again. And I'm going to select this hole. And for my direction, I'm going to select this rectangle. So you can say, okay, that's not too bad. I'm going to say 8, and looky there. Instead of going in one direction, it actually kind of goes in a circle. And I'm going to say curve length. And what that basically does is it says pattern along this object and evenly space 8 of them. Hit OK. And so now I have this pattern going around this rectangle. And what's really wild about it is it's not even just a rectangle, but it's also a diamond. So this is at an angle all the way around. I'm going to undo this for a second here. And I'm going to redo it again just so you can see what I did. So I click on the hole. And then for the direction, I pick on the rectangle. Now, I did this on purpose. I wanted you to see what happened whenever I click down here on this rectangle. What happens is basically where the starting point of the geometry is. Being down here, it doesn't like it. So I just have to flip it around here. And you can see it still doesn't like the way it's going. For whatever reason, sometimes your rectangle, like the origin of it, for example, doesn't like it. So then what I'm going to do is instead of selecting that down here on this direction of it, I'm going to come up here and select up here. Change it over to curve length and we're done. I wanted to show you that sometimes whenever you click on objects, it doesn't work correctly just because of the direction it's going for whatever reason. So sometimes you do need to deselect and reselect for curve length pattern. It's a little bit trickier, but it's not the end of the world. So if it does mess up on you on a different object, go through and change it out there again. And you will notice that the chrome pattern looks a little weird. Little Easter egg here for you. The chrome pattern is actually a picture of the Lake Oswego or Portland, Oregon office of Autodesk. So you can see what their office looks like, their parking lot, just by looking at a chrome pattern. One release, it was like the woods. See this one, there's actually a guy sitting on his motorcycle. One last thing here is there were additional options I didn't show you in patterning because I wanted to come over here to this part. And say this direction, I will go 6. This direction, flip around here. Let's do 3. So I have the double arrow. And right now I have it set to identical. If I hit OK, see what'll happen is my holes don't go all the way through. because what it's doing is it's giving me the exact same hole as the original hole. The original hole is through all. So what you have to do with your rectangular pattern is come in here, tell it to adjust. You say okay with adjust, then what it does is it goes through all. It's a mathematical time saver, so to speak. So if your part is just like a piece of sheet metal, for example, or flat, then the identical orientation will work just fine. But if it's an irregular shape you want to do adjust, optimize will actually somehow calculate better if you're doing a large number. Anything larger than 50, it will go out and optimize it somehow. I'm not really sure what that actually does calculation-wise, but I've done like some large perforations where you're talking about thousands and thousands of holes, and it is suggested that you go through there and use the optimize if you're doing sheet metal or something like that and you're doing like a perforated sheet. The secondary one is the orientation. How do you want it to be orientated? And then you can adjust it to either identical, direction 1 or direction 2. Most of the time you don't really have to mess with this. This will handle itself. This is more if you have a pattern starting on an angular surface or rounded surface, you can adjust it. The majority of the time, only one you really need to watch out is whether or not you want it to adjust or be identical. Situation like this, we want it to adjust. So now we're good to go. So we have our pattern in there. This object is going to be creating patterns too. And the other object to play along at home is just going to be creating patterns. Play along with this, see what you can do, and have some fun. Don't overthink patterning. Don't try to over pattern, but definitely utilize it in your designs. Reuse features whenever possible.